All right, let's jump right in. We're going to talk about 1848, a single year when the entire political system that had held Europe together for over 30 years just shattered. It was a system built on principle and a shared fear of change, and then almost overnight, it was just gone.
So you have to ask, right? What happens when the game board is completely flipped over? When all the old rules of politics are thrown right out the window, what do you do next? That's the exact problem Europe's leaders had to figure out in the absolute whirlwind of 1848.
Now, to really get why it was such an explosion, we first have to understand what came before. After Napoleon, Europe's great powers had built this really fragile peace. It wasn't really based on tough, formal treaties. It was more of a gentleman's agreement, a shared set of conservative ideas, and a deep desire to stop another massive war from tearing the continent apart. And at the very heart of this was what we call the Metternich system, named for the Austrian statesman who was basically its chief architect. You can think of it like the political operating system for Europe, and its prime directive was super simple. Keep the borders and the monarchies from 1815 exactly as they are, and crush any liberal or nationalist uprising that even thinks about threatening that stability. The main muscle behind this system, that was the three big conservative monarchies, Russia, Prussia, and Austria. They formed something called the Holy Alliance. This was basically a club united by this one core belief in conservatism. Their shared mission was to keep the status quo, to fight any move towards constitutions or liberalism, because they truly believed that if you gave an inch, you'd get total revolutionary chaos. Well, as it turns out, that chaos came anyway. The Spring of Nations, as it's called, wasn't just one event. It was like a tidal wave of uprisings that just swept across the entire continent, changing the political map and the rules of diplomacy forever. You know, what's really incredible is just how fast this all happened. It starts in Sicily in January. By the end of February, it hits Paris and topples the king. A week later, France's new government issues this radical new foreign policy. And then, the ultimate symbol of the old world's collapse, on March 13th, Prince Metternich himself is forced out of power in Vienna. I mean, the dominoes just fell with breathtaking speed. And this quote from France's new foreign minister, Lamartine, just nails the new reality perfectly. He's basically saying, hey, everyone, legally speaking, that whole system you've been using for decades, yeah, we don't recognize it anymore. But then he adds that pragmatic bit. But we recognize the borders as they are. It was this brilliant message designed to keep the radicals at home happy while telling all the nervous kings abroad, don't worry, we're not about to launch another Napoleonic conquest. So the takeaway here is crucial. With Metternich gone and France basically tearing up the old rulebook, the world of conservative solidarity, the world of the Holy Alliance was officially over. The system of 1815 was dead. So what took its place? Well, chaos. With the old rules gone, the great powers stopped acting like they were all in the same club. It became every nation for itself, each one just scrambling to protect its own skin amidst all the uncertainty. And you can see just how differently everybody reacted. You've got Russia, under Tsar Nicholas I, still trying to be the defender of the old ways. France is walking this insane tightrope. Great Britain, super pragmatic under Lord Palmerston, just wants to keep things balanced and, whatever happens, avoid a big war. Prussia's king was a mess, totally torn between his old-school conservative side and this powerful new call of German nationalism. And Austria was just trying to survive, to keep its whole empire from completely falling apart. Okay, to really see this new, chaotic game of diplomacy in action, let's look at three specific crises that blew up in 1848. Each one is a perfect example of how the old rules just didn't apply anymore.
First up, Poland. For decades, the idea of an independent Poland was this huge rallying cry for liberals all over Europe. But in reality, Poland was carved up, and the biggest piece was locked down tight by the super anti-revolutionary Russian Empire.
So on one side, you have these passionate revolutionaries in Germany and France screaming for a war against Russia to free Poland. But on the other side, you have the cold, hard math of the great powers. Russia made it absolutely clear it would go to war to stop an independent Poland from existing. And France, for all its revolutionary talk, it just offered some vague support, and in the end did nothing. National interest was already winning out over revolutionary ideals.
All right, next we go to the border of Germany and Denmark, to these little territories called Schleswig and Holstein. This complicated local issue suddenly became a huge international crisis, and it was a direct clash between the powerful new idea of German nationalism and the old monarchical claims of Denmark.
The German nationalists, and even the King of Prussia, who sent his army in, were insisting these duchies had to be part of a new united Germany. Denmark, of course, fought to keep them. But here's the key part. The other great powers, especially Britain and Russia, jumped in. And why? Because they did not want to see a powerful, united Germany pop up and upset the whole balance of power.
And the result was the Armistice of Malmö. Prussia was basically forced by diplomatic pressure from Britain and Russia to back down. Now think about that. This powerful new force, German nationalism, wasn't defeated by Danish soldiers. It was defeated by the cold, hard interests of the other big players in Europe. The German national cause was just betrayed.
The final and biggest conflict happened in Italy. Italian nationalists in the Austrian-controlled regions of Lombardy and Venetia saw what was happening everywhere else and rose up. The Italian kingdom of Sardinia saw its big chance and declared war on Austria, dreaming of creating a unified northern Italian state.
This chart really spells out how messy everyone's motives were. Sardinia wanted to unite Italy. Austria wanted to hold on to its empire. Simple enough. But then look at France and Britain. France, the revolutionary nation, was sympathetic to the Italians, but it absolutely did not want a powerful new country right on its border. And Britain's main goal was to stop France from using the war as an excuse to grab territory. They actually wanted to keep Austria strong to balance out both France and Russia. And this gets to the absolute heart of the matter. In all three of these huge crises, Poland, Germany, and Italy, not a single one of the great powers made its final call based on ideology. The old conservative solidarity was totally gone, but this new idea of revolutionary solidarity, it was just as weak. Every single decision came down to cold, calculated national self-interest.
So that brings us to the real legacy of 1848. The revolutions themselves? They mostly failed to get what they wanted in the short run. But in that failure, they succeeded at one huge thing. They completely demolished the old diplomatic system and kicked off a new, much more cynical era. And here you can see the fundamental shift, side by side. Before 1848, diplomacy was about principles, keeping things the same through ideological groups like the Holy Alliance. After 1848, it was all about realpolitik. That's a German word for realistic, practical politics. The goal wasn't to preserve the system anymore. The goal was to advance your own state's power, making and breaking alliances whenever it suited you.
This new era was run by a whole new type of leader, guys like Felix Schwarzenberg, who took over in Austria. As he famously put it, he judged from facts, not from principles. The age of ideology was over. The age of the hard-nosed realist had officially begun. And the final nail in the coffin of that revolutionary dream came in December of 48. France, the country that kicked the whole thing off, elected Louis Napoleon as its president. He was a pragmatist, a nationalist, and a man who would play the game of realpolitik better than almost anyone. Another realist was now on the scene. So we're left with this fascinating paradox. The revolutions failed, but in doing so, they completely destroy the old world that was built on conservative principles. And from those ashes rose a dangerous new order, a world based on pure national interest. This was the stage being set for the next generation of realists, men like Bismarck and Prussia, who would use this cynical new playbook to forge nations not with treaties and congresses, but with blood and iron.